Some they call it functional alcoholism, but if you know anything about Ben, he's got vision with precision, microphones and a tinkle of derision. You're about to hear what beer can be. It's time for Barley and Me.
Welcome to Barley and Me. I'm your host, Ben Rice. We're here today in our own homes, getting closer to not being, though. So it's another exciting episode of Barley and Me. Today I'm happy to announce that we are talking with Greater Purpose Brewing's Christopher VanHall.
Hello.
And comedian and host of the Who's Your God podcast, Amy Miller.
Hello. Welcome to my home.
Thank you.
My bedroom, actually.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we have a couch in the bedroom. No big deal.
I mean, that's the dream. Like, I would like to have my bedroom in the living room and my living room in the bedroom. Like, that's kind of how I feel about it.
All the rooms are mixed up these days. Offices are dining rooms. Studios are yoga studio. You know, it's crazy.
Yeah. Where we're at is my podcast office, it's my work office, it's our spare bedroom, and it's my yoga room and my beer storage. It's doing a lot of work. So
there you go.
I'm sure people could probably figure this out from context with Greater Purpose, Who's Your God. There's kind of a theme to this podcast episode. Christopher, can you tell us a little bit about Greater Purpose and how business is going for you?
Yeah, the Greater Purpose Brewing Company, we're a brewery that was funded and it's owned by a church. Our church that I pastor sold our building a few years back with the intent of building a brewery that was going to use 30 to 60% of its profits to fund local charities like the NAACP, Planned Parenthood, Diversity Center, Save Our Shores, and Homeless Garden Project. And those are just some of the organizations that we're going to be supporting with funds from the brewery.
I love that.
Thank you.
Christopher, are you telling me... Okay, we're going to get into it, but...
Yeah.
Let's do it.
You telling me... You have a Christian church where you can drink beer and you guys give to charity, which is actually
a charity.
What Jesus wanted us all to do was to help others. I mean, this is crazy. Aren't you supposed to just collect money and make people feel bad?
So, yes, I am telling you exactly that. When it was the pre-COVID era, before these whole lockdown measures that are, totally necessary, by the way, enough churches aren't saying that, so stay home. Before that happened, we met in an open bar and we encouraged people to get a drink or two. Matter of fact, the more you drink, the better my sermons are.
My comedy's that way too.
So we did that. Prior to that, we had alcohol at a lot of our functions, because we wanted to break down these preconceived notions that people have about Christianity. And that's mostly because of the prominence of far-right evangelical beliefs in America. I mean, people don't really know about more liberal approaches to Christianity. But prior to opening a brewery, we were giving away 100% of Sunday donations to local charity. The issue is we live in Santa Cruz, and I don't know if you know much about the area, but it's stupid.
I do. Yeah, I'm from the Bay Area.
Yeah. So, I mean, paying rent here is not an easy endeavor. We were only getting a few $100s a month in donations. So for us, kind of coming up with a creative approach to doing community service was vital because, it's so expensive to live here. People just could not afford to donate. They wanted to, they just couldn't afford it.
Yeah. It's interesting when I think about, because I grew up in very fundamentalist Baptist church, which is why I have a religion podcast. We'd love to have you on.
Would love to be on.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I think in some ways, the no drinking thing also came from very noble reasons in a lot of ways. Like, I think especially in, communities where there's a lot of addiction and a lot of people die from that addiction, then it becomes this sort of blanket, like, thou shalt not drink situation, which is, of course, nowhere in the fucking Bible.
They're always, they are sauced all the time.
Yeah.
And my church was also, a branch of the Baptist church that was no dancing, no movies above PG, no secular music, like basically as strict as you can get. And drinking was only one of those things. But it's like, even if some of that is for, in your mind, noble reasons, because you're like, oh, we're trying to save people from addiction. Forbidding things only ever pushes people into the other extreme, right? Like, that's always how anything has worked. Every time, if I'm 14 years old and you're telling me not to masturbate, guess what I'm going to try to do first thing I get alone, Sorry to talk to a pastor about jerking off, but listen,
No.
I'm not a Christian anymore, so.
No, in fact,
but yeah, it's
I would say 40% of our church is atheist anyway. So these are not conversations that I'm unaccustomed to having. These aren't the kind of conversations that we shy away from on Sunday mornings either. We talk about real shit. And I think in the American church, Christians are known for what they don't do, which is what you were discussing and, alluding to, is we're telling people, don't do this, don't do this. We teach abstinence in so many things. And you don't really see that in the Bible. What you do see is an encouragement for moderation in some things, which I can see wisdom in. But there are people getting hammered in the Bible that are having a good time. Jesus made wine and drank it. In fact, I come from that far right Baptist background as well. And what brought me into a progressive understanding of Christianity was going to seminary and asking questions that were contrary to what I was taught on Sunday mornings. And one of those questions had to do with alcohol, because they were talking about drinking in the Bible. I was like, wait a minute. Wasn't that, grape juice? That wasn't real wine, right? And my professor was like, no, it was wine. Like, they drank in the Bible. And it just sent me down this rabbit trail of asking more questions like, well, what about Genesis, and is evolution a thing? And what about sexuality and gender identity? And to the point where 99% of the people I get along with are atheist or agnostic, and far leftist. And 99% of the people I don't get along with are people that share my faith identity.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's just not a sustainable lifestyle. And then what happens is, like, someone like me, I left the church, and then it left such a sour taste in my mouth, because it's all about control. It's these lists of rules without the focus on, the great parts of church, which it sounds like you guys focus on, which is so cool, which is like helping other people and having community. And, if you emphasize those things for children, especially like that you're connected to other people, that the way you live affects other people, like, that's also going to mitigate some of these other issues. You know what I mean? If you're like a good person who doesn't want to hurt anybody, you might not end up being a nasty, mean drunk. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because you're motivated for the right reasons. Like, nobody ever wants to not drink because their pastor told them not to. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like, you don't have to steal. If people are like, hey, are you in trouble? Do you need help? Here's the thing that you can have temporarily. No more stealing. And if you're raised properly, you're probably not going to be like, I should probably go murder somebody today. So it seems like you can absolutely mitigate it. I also come from a religious background. Both my parents are in the church, but in different churches now. And my mom's very, very liberal. She always taught us to kind of like see every side of the issue and like not be scared of things that are different from us. And my dad, at one point, created his own religion because the one he was in wasn't strict enough. So
nice,
fun. Cool stuff.
I mean, that's a real thing. Some people really thrive by the rules. Some people really
He's not thriving.
Need and appreciate that structure. Yeah. It's not for everyone. Not for me.
Yeah, no.
Not for me.
Pass. Hard pass. He's like, do you want to join? I'm like, no. Is it the one where women aren't allowed to talk at all? Not even the spoken to thing? Like, not allowed? No. You can't tell my niece she's going to hell when she's 11 because she's female. That's the only reason. He's like, well, you're female. Going to hell. I'm like, oh, boy.
Well, it depends. Has she been acting like a little slut or what?
No, because original sin, Amy. Therefore, there's no coming back from it. But yeah, also huge whore. My 11-year-old niece. No. Yeah. So it's a messy thing, religion, I guess, which is always fun to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, now I'm it was so long that I was in the church, and it was so long I had that sour taste that I still am surprised when I meet people like you, even though I continue to do so, especially since I've had a religion podcast, like, moderate progressive Christians. I appreciate it so much. I still have that thing in my head that my pastor would have told me, which is like, this guy's not really a Christian, it's like something I can't control. And of course I don't believe that. It's just the voice in my head that was planted there. I mean, I was brainwashed. Let's call it what it is. But I mean, it's delightful. Sorry to get into industry talk, but I wrote a script about a sort of moderate progressive Christian teen that I'm pitching as like an animated show. And, I think it's hilarious.
Yeah.
But there's always a certain number of people, especially in LA, fucking TV industry people that are like, I don't understand the need for it. And I'm like, well, that's because you live in LA. So most of your life has been completely free of religion. But the more common perspective in this country is people who are like, I am attached maybe to my church community, and I want to have a God, but I don't want, especially teenagers right now who have, parents my age that are more fundamentalists, like that they're like, I want to be connected to parts of it, but I don't want to be a homophobe. I don't want to be a racist. I want to help my community. And it's been funny explaining this to people, like how common it is and how much of like a conversation it is in this country that people are not anti-Christian when you get away from the coasts. Like they're very, very Christian, but a lot of the younger generation is looking for, and it's like the prevalence of Hillsong and churches like that, which have their own issues. But
flags over Jesus.
Yeah. Where people in their 20s and teenagers are looking for like a loving version of Christianity. I mean, basically Christianity as it was supposed to be. Yeah. If you ask Christ, and I did. And so it's just always cool to meet people like you, because I've had so many of these conversations where people are like, I don't get it. Like, who literally cares about going to church ever? And I'm like, oh, like a whole country of people.
Entire towns, entire counties, entire states care very much about this.
There's a belt made of the Bible in the United States. They absolutely care about this.
Physically, it's how they pave their driveways. It's just pages of the Bible.
Honestly, if that's the Bible Belt, then America's got its pants down.
Got it.
And that's what shocks me about conversations like this, where it's, I almost feel like progressive Christianity is the best kept secret in spiritual communities in America, because we do align with being open and affirming LGBTQ. We do say Black Lives Matter, and we participate in anti-racism efforts, and we believe in evolution. We don't believe scripture's literal. Lots of it's metaphorical, and the list goes on, but it seems like it's a rare thing to encounter people that actually believe that, to the point where it's almost like we're viewed as cult leaders and things like that.
Right.
But what really happened is there's been this new version of the faith that kind of emerged from Puritan mindsets in America that has grown and festered in the far right Christian movement, to the point where what I would consider to be authentic Christianity, which is more about ethics and less about belief, it's almost unrecognizable in America. And it's interesting to me, but it's also infuriating because it makes my job so damn hard consistently.
Yeah. And it's not just that you're a best kept secret, like you're, actively probably being silenced a lot of the time too. And just to be fair, like put this out there, moderate Christianity that's, sort of public and like a lot of people are on board with is, I think, fairly newer or more recent for white people, but Black folks have been doing it for decades. And that's what's so crazy is you get like a white celebrity, like a Chris Pratt or something, or like a white athlete that people are like, man, I really, I would like him, but he's a Christian. And it's like, what do you mean when you say that? Okay. Cause if he's a homophobe, yes, that's bad. That's shitty. I don't want to support him. But just being a Christian, like, I mean, how many black artists, black athletes have you seen at award shows for decades thanking God when they win or they win the Super Bowl? And it's like, oh, that didn't like count to you. You know, I mean, like the black community has been doing, you know, community service based moderate Christianity for a really long time. And I always think like it's important to point that out, but it's definitely newer amongst, you know, a guy who looks like you got a beard, you know, you could go either way. Like when the interview started, I was like, if this guy is a fundamentalist Christian, I don't know what I'm doing on this thing. But then you were drinking a beer. And so
I say fuck Marjorie Taylor Greene from the pulpit on a consistent basis. So
I love it.
One of those.
Yeah. Now, Amy, are you positing that there's a different level of religion when it comes to white communities that maybe, I don't know how to say this, but maybe like helps tie in white supremacy to keep other people down? That's
yes.
I didn't notice that at all. And I've had the good fortune, despite my dad, of having pretty good, when I was going to church as a kid, when I was like required to, having pretty decent pastors who would call out racist parishioners and like try to teach people to be good, and not really condemn people for struggling with things. So, I mean, that's pretty cool. My mom was always very much like getting into arguments with like my uncle's like a homophobe, and she's like, when does God mention homosexuality? He's like, oh, I can't say how exactly, but it's in there a lot. And she's like, he mentions it 0 times. He mentions it 0 times in the entirety of the New Testament. So maybe just don't do that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm from the... Go ahead.
I'm so sorry to interrupt.
No. Please stop. You're being a misogynist right now.
No, I don't.
Typical pastor shit.
No. I'm on Zoom. I didn't see you speak.
I was going to say really quickly, I do want to hear your thoughts, of course. I mean, I'm from the East Bay, so it was like the racist part was not a big aspect of our church. First of all, very hard to grow up fundamentalist Christian in the Bay Area, but you have to really commit to it. You have to commit hard. But the homophobia was still there, and that was almost even crazier. I'm like, I can see San Francisco. What are you guys talking about? Like, you know, my sister's queer. There's like gay folks in our families. Like they live in our community. You know, and it's interesting that y'all made this decision of like, well, yeah, we're mostly white Southerners with a fundamentalist Baptist church in the Bay Area, but we're not racist because, like, you know, other races live in our community. And it's like, guess what? Guess who else lives here? Fucking gay people.
Yeah, in Santa Cruz, the culture overall, it's kind of weird because we're very open for gender identity and sexual identity in Santa Cruz, but there's a lot of racism here in Santa Cruz. It's a very white town. So when you point that out, heckles kind of go up here. So it's interesting to see that. But as far as the faith community is concerned, in a lot of churches, like you said, they are actively anti-racist in their messaging, but they do struggle with being homophobic. And a lot of that just stems from really piss poor theology from people that have never studied Greek or Hebrew. The Bible mentions homosexuality, quote unquote, about 8 to 13 times, depending on who's giving a dissertation of the text. None of those words in Koine Greek or in ancient Hebrew mean a homosexual. They mean rapist, they mean greedy, or they mean pedophile in context, which I think people of all faiths can agree those are very bad things.
Or sometimes at the time, I would assume also that some of them are implying incest, like, you know, a brother and a father or 2 brothers. I mean, there's such a limited number of people. It's like you're talking about 2 men lying together. You know, that's like, well, you know, that's also saying family members shouldn't fuck. And like, that I can get behind.
So it's in Leviticus, it says, you shall not lie with a man like you would lie with a woman. And the implication from a ancient Hebrew standpoint was, it was very common for conquering soldiers to take prisoners and to rape them because they were very misogynistic cultures back then. So they would treat their captives like they would treat women in their society. So they were lowering their social status because, again, they were misogynistic. And not saying that's good. Definitely not good. So when the Bible says don't lay with a man like you would lay with a woman, it's saying don't rape them, which again, anti-rape verse, a lot of people don't know this. If you don't study ancient Hebrew, or if you don't go to a good seminary that has you read books outside of the Bible, because a lot of seminaries just have you go and study one book the entire time and use that book to defend itself. So they're like masters of circular reasoning. If you go to an actual seminary, a good one, this is one of the first things they cover. And many people from Baptist backgrounds and Pentecostal backgrounds, their minds are just blown.
So why did you want to be a pastor after growing up in like a far right Baptist church?
So I was once a bigoted piece of shit. I drank the Kool-Aid of the far right Christian movement. I was a music director at one of those Six Flags Over Jesus churches, like you were talking about earlier. And I was asked to preach one day on worship because I was the music director. So they considered that to be worship. And in my studies, I studied ancient Hebrew and Koine Greek, and I realized that music was not the biblical definition of worship. It was more about how you conducted your life in community, how you took care of other people, how you served others. That was biblical worship. I was like, well, shit, I made an entire career on being a worship director, but biblically, that's not worship. So what else have I missed? So I kind of went down this journey of relearning all of these things that I thought I knew as a Christian. And so for a long time, I just kind of wanted to save souls because that's what far right extremists tell you to do. Go save people from hell. And then in wanting to understand scripture better, I began to move away from far right extremism. And it still made me want to remain in ministry because I think you have a choice. You can either abandon the church to all of its bullshit and let it go unchallenged, sowing harm, or you can be a part of the movement that's re-steering the ship and presenting an authentic version of Christianity that so many people have never heard before.
You can become a comedian, get a religion podcast, and then try
too.
to sell a show about Christianity.
You know, that honestly might be the next phase in my evolution. I've got a podcast too. Maybe that's the next step for me. I don't know. Or I just
Not
do this
that funny
thing.
so far, but I'm giving you some time. We'll see.
I'll work on it. I'm funnier if you drink, though. That's why we got the brewery to help my comedian ambitions.
Well, you got to lay the foundation before you can get to the funny. Everybody knows that. We're just discussing what that is first.
It's funny that you mentioned that, when you talk about going out and saving people, I mean, of course, even as a kid, I was like, oh, it's my job to try to collect souls, basically save people. And so much of that was kind of the only community service we did. It was like charity, or it was like outreach couched as charity, but with so many conditions. And I mean, that's the thing about even anti-racist evangelical churches. There's still this classism there that's so deeply ingrained, which is also funny because Jesus hung out with poor people and homeless people and whatever. And it's like, a lot of the times someone just does need shelter and not a sermon. And you can give that and show an example of Christ-like behavior and what Christians are capable of. And that would be more likely to bring someone around to your church than being like, we'll give you shelter if you do these 10 things.
Yeah.
Which is why, you've got this colonization, mindset with Western culture where they were conquering lands that weren't, stealing lands that weren't theirs. And part of the reason missionary work was so successful based on their own metrics of conversion was because they were going into impoverished communities that capitalism basically destroyed. And they were offering sustenance and housing.
Yeah, they're like, here's a pair of Nikes if you come to our church.
Yeah, because of course these impoverished families were coming to church. We just had a discussion with a Native activist about how, mission work is dangerous. It's harmful. And I'm actually opposed to it. I don't agree with it. I think I agree with mission work if it was just providing needs of people that were suffering.
Yes.
And that's it. And there's so many verses in the Old and New Testament that back that up, where God wants nothing to do with religiosity in the Old Testament. And in the New Testament, these leaders of the early church said, hey, pray in your closet, pray in the privacy of your own home. Don't take this stuff out on the streets like hypocrites do. Yeah. Yet when we look at American Christians, they're doing the exact opposite.
Yeah. And it's literally cult-like behavior. And for American evangelical Christians who are so, in theory, anti-cult, and are, by the way, they also decide who's a cult and who's not. They get to decide.
Right.
But that is, like the Rajneeshis in Oregon and Keith Raniere. It's like all these people are able to grab you when they have really basic needs they can fulfill for you, housing, food, community, and education sometimes. And it's like, yeah, if your charity is there's a condition to it, which is you have to join our church. You are a cult. You are not being Christ-like.
Yeah.
No, agreed 100%.
Yeah. Here's a question. Speaking of cults, if Jesus were to come back and be like, I'm the leader of a religion, he would definitely be locked up and killed for being a cult leader, right? Like if he came back today with the same preaching that he had 2,000 years ago, he'd be murdered for sure.
100%. Jesus would be ostracized.
Good point. Thank you, Amy.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, he would sound insane.
Yeah.
I mean, especially under any capitalist regime. Nothing he says makes sense. Might as well be fucking Bernie Sanders, but nicer.
That's the shining beacon of American Christian hypocrisy, is the fact that Bernie Sanders, a socialistic Jewish leader with a movement behind him, could not get elected as president. Every authentic Christian should have been behind Bernie Sanders 100%, but they weren't just, meh about Bernie Sanders. They were diametrically opposed to the dude. And it's
interesting to think about what kind of success someone would have if they were sort of financially a socialist like Bernie. And I know that these people exist somewhere, like Bernie socialist financially, but also were anti-abortion and anti-queer folks. I wonder if that person could get elected. I truly do. They'd have a better shot, because that's the thing. It's like American Christians vote on two things at all times, and to some extent a third sort of classist, racist thing. But that's it. And back to when I was little, it was like there's two things that decide who we vote for. It's abortion and gay marriage, basically. And it's like there's so many other things going on, guys. Yeah.
And again, the Bible doesn't discuss either one of those things. Abortion in Numbers chapter 5, in your spare time, I'm not going to read it to you. It's a long chapter, but it's an abortion ritual that priests were permitted to do if husbands suspected that their wives were cheating on them, which is horrific, and it should not be resurrected in modern context. But that's the closest thing to an abortion that's discussed in the Bible. Ancient Hebrews believe that life began with breath, and that belief persisted until the 1960s, 1970s. And then far-right Christian extremists adopted this anti-abortion talking point, and now they have made it their mission to go on this crusade against women's rights. And it's nowhere near biblically based at all. No,
and it's exactly that. It's just a means of control, because if you take away women's choice to not have children, we get up to all kinds of stuff. We'll want to work. We'll want to vote. We'll want to never have kids, maybe, which is horrific, because then we're just out in the streets, Yeah. You got to keep us at home with some babies. Otherwise, things go crazy.
Can you imagine a world where the population stays the same or maybe even slightly decreases? What an insane... When I was a kid, I'm pretty sure the population of the Earth was 2 billion, and I was like, oh, it's 8 points, whatever. I'm like, how did it do that? I'm not even 40, and it quadrupled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't need this many people right now. Anyway, what I'm saying is abort your children. Sorry.
Is this a beer podcast too, or what are we doing here?
Right. Every once in a while, I like to kind of go away from it. There's times when we don't.
I don't want to take charge, but
yeah. Look, I was going to eventually use the. Hey, you said you soured on religion. Speaking of sours, Christopher, you have a sour available at Greater Purpose Brewing.
We do. We do.
Yeah,
It's called
I do want to know where I can acquire your beers.
Yeah, Santa Cruz. It's in SoCal technically, but most people consider it to be Santa Cruz. It's where East Cliff Brewing Company used to be. We actually purchased the brewery.
Well, that saves some money.
I can't buy it online or in a store. I got to come up to
So
Santa Cruz.
Very soon, you'll be able to get shipping. We are working on in-county deliveries right now. That system's fresh as a daisy. Like literally, we delivered our first orders last week. So shipping is next in line. So if you just keep an eye on our Facebook page and on our Instagram, we are going to let the community know the moment that becomes available.
Nice. And okay, now I am taking over. Why did you decide to get into beer? Because speaking of cults, I like to drink beer, sure. I can't get down with the culture. Truly, I'm sorry. I can't be a part of another very male-dominated thing. And let me tell you something. I once got a gig in Oregon. I was hosting the Brewers Awards, whatever the fuck they call them. It was like Oregon. It was everyone that was a brewer in the state of Oregon. It's like an 800-person theater. And I mean, I've never had a more unruly, disrespectful crowd. And I'm an excellent host. And I wasn't, I'm like, had control of the thing. But I was like, this is a bunch of assholes with fucking beards who, like, I only got it under control when I literally started to scream at them. I'm sure there's many, I know, because I know them, there are many nice brewers out there, but the culture is gross. Can I say that on your beer podcast?
You can.
The culture is fucking terrible. It's like comic books for me where I'm like, I just do it in secret. Like, yeah, I like a nice microbrew and I like to learn about beer and I've made it in the past and I like to drink it, but I don't talk about it. I don't talk about comic books because the people that are into it the most are the fucking worst.
Yeah. That is true. Patrons and brewers and ownership alike, like those are too far into it. It's too much to deal with. I think
beer. It's supposed to be fun. You
fun.
Can let girls do it. Fucking relax, guys.
I will say, brewer-specific events is like the time they're allowed to get trashed with their friends and nobody cares, which makes them unruly assholes 100% of the time. Any no public facing event, they're like, yes, finally we can drink beer in an event without it be like, oh yes, this one is made with these hops and is this percentage. You don't care, you just want to know which one gets you drunk fastest. Okay, fine, here's the one that's drunk fastest. So I kind of get it, and I'm sorry that happened to you. Yeah, it's like
Star Wars nerds. Like, oh no, it's okay. I mean, my boyfriend and I were just talking about this because he used to run a comedy club, and I used to work for a bunch of different sized venues, and we were like, man, don't you miss beer reps? I mean, that's a kind of person.
Yeah.
You have to be salesy. You have to be really into beer. It's all like the same kind of guy or like a really hot lady. And it's just like they just give you free tickets to shit. And then you're like, oh, okay, so I can see the Blazers courtside, but I have to hang out with this drunk guy. That's fine. Like, like it's just such a specific culture. I know I have friends and there's many people that just sort of brew quietly at home, and it's like they're not a part of the scene, but the scene is wild. Mm-hmm. And why did you want to get into that, Chris?
Well, so I didn't want to get into that. The idea for brewing wasn't, this concept without a blueprint. In church history, monks brewed spirits and wine and beer for centuries to fund charity. They're not paying me, but Chimay brew. Every one that you buy goes to orphanages in the EU. And they're just an example of lots of monasteries in Belgian culture that have done that throughout, the course of hundreds of years of generating profits for their community. So that was an attractive aspect to us. And we also had a congregant that brewed excellent beer in-house. But to your point, there is a notorious amount of misogyny within brewery culture. There's also a lot of racism that I've seen. And even anti-LGBT stuff. A lot of pro-Trump breweries, when you really start looking at the owners' Facebook pages back in the day, you would see a lot of
and
pretty
still
gnarly.
Today.
Still today. And so we, made a commitment to not only be a church that's doing something that's definitely contrary to what you see in far right culture, but also a brewery that's doing that as well. So in-house, you come into our beer garden, there's a sign that says, we do not tolerate catcalling. We do not tolerate sexism. We do not tolerate ableism, homophobia, and the transphobia. The list goes on. And I've 86'd a couple of people that have violated those rules on the spot. And, they love to throw out the fact that I'm a pastor and I'm not supposed to tell them to get the fuck out. But if you're bigoting, fuck out. Don't come to my brewery.
I think that's exactly what you're supposed to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I love what you're doing. It is really beautiful. Like, I'm being cynical about the brewery stuff, but I think, biblically too, and you're talking about the monks brewing, but it's also like, you're taking a grain from the earth. There's so many parables about grains. There's so many stories in the Bible about grains. It's just so beautiful to like take this like very innocuous thing from the earth, make something, and then turn it into something that helps people and gets you drunk if you want. It's just every part of the cycle is so beautiful, and it should always be that way. It's just every part of the cycle is so beautiful, and it should always be that way.
Exactly. I'm very much so a fan of the whole symbolism behind using grain to produce something positive. My denomination is called the Disciples of Christ, and they're pretty much a well-kept secret too on the coast. They're very prominent in the Midwest, very progressive in this region especially, but still nobody's heard of us. But one thing that we do have in common is we do communion every week, and it's not magic, bread. It's not magic grape juice. It's literally just food. There's nothing special about it, but the symbolism behind it is powerful. And that was attractive as well, being able to use grain to produce positivity in our community. So yeah, right there with you.
Yeah, I love it. And it's just that reminder of your connection to everybody else and your connection to the world. It's like there's so many things in the Bible about sowing seeds, and it's like just this constant reminder, everything I do, all my actions leave, a little seed somewhere, and you can use those for good or you can use those for harm. And I think it's really cool. Great job, Christopher.
Hey, well, I'm trying. Thank you so much. The first prayer of communion in church history that was recorded in Koine Greek says, as this bread was once many grains scattered over many fields, may too humanity come together and be whole again. That was the symbolism behind the first community, was wholeness in a fractured society. And, for me, I hopefully we're trying to pass that value on as our in our beer as well.
Yeah, and I think, the Jews are a great example of a religion that has always worked so hard to keep that tie of like meals and food and the things that they eat as, a symbol for their history, a symbol for how you're supposed to behave and be a good Jew. Like, I love that connection, and I think even, those are a lot of my greatest memories from being a kid in church is not the fucking sermons. It's like eating food with everybody after.
Exactly.
And when you lose that connection, like, why are we a community? Why are we eating together? What's special about it?
Yeah.
If you lose the focus of, how many Christians say grace every night and don't really think about it? Like truly we're so lucky to have food and shelter and each other. And yeah, I like that reminder.
Mm-hmm. Very much.
That's
so.
why I'm going to start my new line of weed.
I'm down to try it, but I was just talking about this before you jumped on the call. I have no tolerance for weed. I can drink like a fish. I'm Irish on both sides. I've got like either an iron liver or a no liver, and like maybe it's just
filtering right through.
Like, I can drink a lot, but I have no tolerance for weed. And at some point in the future, and I don't think we have time to get into it today, I've got some fun stories. So
okay, but let me tell you, I was just like you. I can also drink, also Irish, and I like to drink, and I had really bad experiences on weed, but I found weed that I like, and the amount that I'm supposed to take.
Yes.
I pretty much stick to edibles. like low, I mean, we're talking low impact, but like still like I mean, it's like taking a fucking Xanax, but it's all natural. So it's great.
And non-addictive.
It's only been in the past, I mean, I just turned 40 and it's been in the past 2 years that I can like eat weed at all and feel good. So listen, your weed is out there. This is what I'm telling you. And with my new dispensary, Jesus Christ Weed, it's not a great name. We're working on it.
Can I pitch one? Can I pitch one? It's great. Yeah. I got it. It's crossfaded. You're welcome.
I love that. That's really good, actually.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so talented. I don't do much, but when I do, it's with impact. Yeah, I also have kind of had the same problem with marijuana over the years. I've been really bad about it because it makes you paranoid and not want to. Everything when I was smoking, it was always like, oh, don't say anything you're thinking. They're all terrible thoughts. They're bad. Nobody wants to hear that. You're boring and you have nothing to say. And then gummies, beautiful. Love them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, see, my story, the very abbreviated version, is because of a dosing mishap and also the failure of the weed tender to tell me how long it takes to feel the effects of weed.
Yes.
My dosage is about like yours, 2 to 3 milligrams. You know, that's it. She gave me sativa instead of indica. That was the first.
Oh boy.
And I took 80 fucking milligrams.
No, I'd be
far
dead.
Too many. Yes, that's bye. Have a good week. You're done.
That part should be illegal.
Yeah.
Like all weed should be legal. But if you put like a new weed smoker or eater in danger like that, like, no, I would be dead from 80 milligrams. I can't
I thought I was going to die. I told my wife who worked at the ER at Stanford at the time, she was walking out the door. I was like, I'm going to die. And she's like, you can't die from this. You're going to be fine. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be the first person. And she was like, well, I'm going to work now. I was like, well, I won't be here when you get back.
Take a nap.
Like
totally been there.
I just binged Studio Ghibli movies and
oh, that's a great way to go. Lean into that curve.
Best experience of my life about 3 hours after the initial impact of impending doom. So, that's my weed story. But I'm with you. 2 milligrams, 3 milligrams. That's my threshold.
Yeah, you're just kind of like, ooh, everything's really funny right now, and like I feel a little hungry. It's like perfect. Yeah. And I'm not thinking about the future or all my problems or my bank account. Like that's that's the whole thing. Cause I can totally hold my alcohol and I always have it. But you know, there's always a certain point if you drink too much where things just get sad.
Yes.
But if you get a little bit too high in the right way on not like 80 milligrams, like you're saying, it's like perfect. Cause you're like, I guess I don't have any problems. I don't know.
Yeah. They're not that big. I have problems, but they're not worth focusing on all the time. Yeah. Totally fine. Speaking of Amy, have you done Gateway Show?
No.
Yeah, because I did the show, and he before I went up, he's like, "Hey, try not to tell the same jokes twice, because you do one sober set, one high set." And I was like, "Why would anyone do that?" And then when I don't do weed at all, and so when I got high, I was like, "It'd be really funny to do the same set twice." Like that's all I could think was just like I was telling new jokes, and I was like, but you should just pick up right where you started. Like the whole time my brain was just like, I miss Master P, which is my opening joke for a long time, was talking about Master P getting a cell phone. Anyway. But I will
say, and speaking in general terms, because a lot of people have like those shows where you do like a sober set and then you come back either really high or really drunk. Or I think people should try it with any drug you want.
Okay.
But the audience has to guess what you're on.
Ooh, I love that.
That would be fun. But I've definitely done like brew haha, which is getting drunk really, really fast, and then you do a second set, and that's always a super fun show. I only did one where I had to eat weed. And
only 5 we had to shoot heroin, so
I think it was fine, but also at the time, like I was touring so much that it's like, you know, at some point your set becomes like a limb.
Yeah.
Like it was just in there. I was definitely fucked up, but I wasn't like, and I was probably out of body a little bit, but I didn't like forget how to do comedy because it just is so, I just had been doing it so much. Now I'm, of course, probably very rusty because it's been like 3 times in a year, but yeah.
Yeah, but you just got a release of a recording this week.
Oh, yeah. If you want to watch a set of mine and you have Epix, or you want to pay $6 or get the free trial and then just cancel. I have a half hour up on Epix. Well, it's 20 minutes of stand-up and 10 minutes of terrible childhood stories. So it's a really interesting format. But yeah, everyone does like their set, real show, we were stage and stuff. And then it was outside because it was this past summer. And then we sat down for interviews that were supposed to be real Oprah style, like, we're going to try to make you cry, but I just was laughing. I just couldn't stop laughing about every horrible thing that ever happened, because I just twisted. But yeah, it's super fun. It's on Epix, and you can either just search for my name, or it's called Unprotected Sets.
Nice.
Which is a pun.
Is it?
Yeah.
I hadn't heard anything similar. But yeah,
or I'm on, like Comedy Central and stuff.
Yeah, no.
There's many ways to watch my stand-up.
Yeah. Last Comic Standing on it. Amy Miller, a good comedian. Check out Solid Gold, her album. It's around. It's very funny. Blah, blah, blah.
It's out there. I'm just saying, at this point, it's, I'm so far removed from my life as a stand-up comedian that it does feel funny to talk about. I don't mean to be dismissive. I'm very proud of all of it, but it's just like, I don't know. I'm just in the house every day.
Like,
so
that's not me anymore. That's a different me. I don't know who you're talking about.
Yeah. So
your comedy's great.
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet. Oh. So have you not done in-person church for almost a year?
Yeah.
But you do it online, or how does this work?
Yeah, we do it online. And, interestingly enough, we have learned that that's more effective for people, because at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about the majority of America that don't have access to progressive spiritual communities. That's a lot of people. And what we're realizing is our sermons, a lot of people need that. And with our podcast that we've been doing, it's been growing, and we've got consistent followers there. So what we kind of are projecting as far as our service and how that's going to look after COVID regulations hopefully end, we'll come back together when it's safe, but in a fellowship capacity. We're going to have lunch at the brewery. All the purchases, 30 to 60% of that money is going to local charity anyway. So come hang out, have a beer with your friends, have lunch. We've always got food trucks and things like that there. And then listen to the sermons and the service online on our Facebook page or on the podcast. And then we will gather together for a monthly worship service in an open bar kind of setting, once a month, as opposed to focusing on the religious traditional aspect of church every week.
That's cool. Yeah. I have a religion podcast with another comedian, so we constantly and exhaustively think about the comparisons between the ministry and being a comedian. And also my co-host used to be a pastor.
Nice.
So this is like well-trodden territory, I'm sure. But I think we have a similar problem right now, right? Where it's like, we've been doing Zoom shows, and it's really cool on one hand that someone in Indiana who lives where there's not a comedy club, or lives near a club who might not book me, that they can see me tell jokes, and they don't have to leave their house. And like, the accessibility is awesome, but we're all still, you do lose that feeling of fellowship. We're animals. Like, when a bunch of humans are in a room together, there's just a different thing that happens. There's, groupthink can be used for good or bad. But the feeling of it is incredible. This is why we're all like missing concerts and like, anything, aside from comedy or church, like anything, just being in a room with people, because it's so different. And you're right. It's like, it's cool. It makes it easier for people to go. You don't have to get dressed and go to a comedy club. You can just open your laptop, pay $5 or whatever, and watch comedians. We're still telling jokes. We're still doing essentially the same stuff. We're sitting down most of the time, which is different. But that feeling is like, it's so hard to get. And I think a lot of things, probably aside from your church and other churches, will go back to really focusing on and appreciating that feeling. You know what I mean? It's like
definitely
something so special we've all missed out on in so many ways for a year, that I'm hoping when we're back, we really find a way to honor it, you know, in whatever the thing is we do, whether it's music or comedy or church. So that's cool that you're really just going to focus on the fellowship of it.
Yeah, that's what they miss the connection of the community. Nobody, you know, this is a slight stab to my ego. Nobody's going on about, oh man, I just miss hearing Christopher live and in person. They're like, no, I just wish I could hug you all and be with you all and share life and food together. That's what they miss, is community. And that's kind of what...
I miss both, you know?
Yeah.
And I think truly we're in a similar boat that way too, where it's like, yeah, people might love my comedy or like, you know, hearing my jokes, but it is my job. I think it's the job of any good comedian or speaker or pastor to really just be a vessel for whatever that thing is. In your case, it's God. In my case, it's comedy and connection or whatever. Like, I don't feel like I'm having a good show unless everyone in the room is getting that collective experience where they feel like they really had a once in a lifetime hour that wasn't just about my jokes. It was like about laughing together and being together and drinking and eating and whatever. So, but you know, there's plenty of pastors and comedians and musicians that don't see gatherings that way and never have. And I'm hoping that will change maybe after, if the pandemic ever goes away, you know, that bad comedians will start to remember how special that thing was that they didn't appreciate, you know?
Yeah. And
I think it was my experience being a former church person that always made me appreciate that about comedy. That I was like, this show is not just the same, you know, even if I've been telling the same jokes for 6 months, working on my hour or whatever it is, this is a specific group of people in a specific place. You know, it's Cincinnati. It's not Omaha. It's whatever. This is one night that will never exist in history again. And I always approached it that way. And that's like a very churchy approach. Like, I definitely have been to a lot of church.
That's solid advice. That'll preach. That's good.
I'm hopeful that more people will kind of appreciate those moments when we're back. It's like, yeah, people are fucking infuriating. It sucks to be in traffic. It sucks to have to go to a place. But like, those are experiences we will never, like, you know, they're irreplaceable. Yeah.
Yeah. And are you like me? I'm an extreme introvert in my personal life. And you would think that a small crowd would just jazz me up because I'm so antisocial. No, I want the big crowd that's excited to be there. I want the energy. I'm not much at the party after. I'm not much at the after party, but like during the shtick, that's when I'm in my moment. Are you like that too?
I am definitely an introvert, and Ben can attest that I followed up to say right away, like, do you do video or is it just audio? Because it's been a whole weird year of like inviting people into my home, basically, in my sanctuary. So it's still like I get anxiety, like even doing podcasts from my house, because this is where I like re-energize myself, you know?
Yeah.
I need a lot of alone time. Always been like fairly introverted, but I have to say about the small crowd, I mean, maybe a little bit different. I think in those moments, it's hard because you're more focused on yourself and you have less of an opportunity to kind of guarantee the group think because the group is smaller. So it's just like more kind of wild hairs to sort of control. But, you know, I mean, it's just a different experience. But I sometimes like a small crowd because those are some of just the craziest, most memorable nights of comedy that I've had. If there's 4 people or 8 people or 10 people, and it does make me so much more nervous somehow. And I don't know how this is logical or how it works, but somehow when there's a small group of people watching you, you're even more under the spotlight than if there's 600 people watching you. And I don't know why that is, but you're so much, I do get more focused on myself and like, I mean, it's like when you host a party at your house when you're in college and you hope that 100 people come and then 5 people come. And so then you have to be just more innovative. And you're like, all right, we're playing a fucking board game. Like it was supposed to be a dance party.
Yeah. That takes
like
care of itself.
But you know, nobody came because I don't have enough friends. So now we're going to get creative. Like I think you become a more creative performer or speaker in those moments. And more invested in each person that's there rather than the collective. So they're just different. Yeah. I like them both. Yeah. But I'm also saying this, almost a year out of stand-up. Probably last year, if you were like, you want to perform for 6 people? I'd be like, no, I fucking hate.
Nope, not right now. Yeah, it's like,
yes, please.
It's a skill set. 'Cause I remember in high school, I was like, oh, you give me a big crowd, I'm going to dominate. But you give me like 5 people, I'm like, I don't know how to talk to anybody. But you can build that strength. Like when I was a new comic, fucking 5 people was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. Then I started hosting an open mic where you were literally trying to get the 3 people who were barflies to turn around. And I was like, oh, you just learn how to do it.
Yeah.
And then
the barfly situation is always an uphill battle. But I would always rather have 10 people who bought a ticket to see me, specifically Amy Miller, and are already on board. Just had to throw my name in there.
Yes, I know.
AmyMillerComedy.com. Then 500 people or 200 people who bought a ticket to see comedy that night without doing any research and didn't, they just wanted to go to the comedy club. I can still make those people laugh because I'm a good comic, but I would rather have the 10 that are like, I already love you, so let's have a night together. Like, we're fucking in it. Like, that's cool.
Yeah. So it is a beer podcast. I should probably mention that I did swing by Greater Purpose to pick up some beers on Monday. So I've been drinking your beers. So what I have is a cherry chocolate porter called It's Pat.
Oh, that sounds so good. Cute can.
Which I was like, oh, It's Pat, or making an SNL reference. But it turns out you're not. And you're doing one of the things that I actually love about a couple breweries. Tell me about this It's Pat's, Christopher.
So I'm very proud of Seamus and Nate for that beer, our brewers, and Mike as well.
Of course, Seamus is a brewer in a Christian brewery.
Great name. Yeah, Seamus, Mike, and Nate knocked it out of the park. That one and the one that we've got coming up next week is called Velma's Hat. And they were really important to me because they were matriarchs of the church. We sold our building to do this brewery, and they kept the doors open years and years before I came to the church. And they were both in their 90s, late 90s, and they passed away recently. So these are memorial beers for them that we'll probably always have on tap. It's Pat was just out of the park. It's one of the best new brews that the Cruz come up with. So people are loving it. But for me, there's an emotional attachment to that beer and to Velma's Hat because those 2 ladies were the world to our community. So
that's really sweet. That's cool. I can't wait to try them.
They're very, very good. But we Velma's hat is a reference to her church lady hats. She always wore these intricate church lady hats on a weekly basis. And then It's Pat was kind of like a dual, like, oh, it might kind of spark some memories from millennials from the SNL days, but then we can kind of
a highly offensive SNL character.
Yes, exactly. and then turn it to something not offensive. That was kind of the ambition behind.
Yeah, you reclaimed it. Yeah. What kind of beer is Velma's Hat?
It is a peach kettle sour.
Ooh, that sounds so good.
So it's like highfalutin church hat beer.
Highfalutin church hat beer for sure. Yeah. And so she was obsessed with peaches, and that was kind of what we went that route. But she was also very snarky. She was like the Sophia of the in-crowd church lady bunch. She was very funny. So we wanted something that was like sweet and what she was into, but also just a little bit tardy, so it could present Velma's character to the community.
Sweet, but packs a punch.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm having a nectarine ale right now. It's pretty good. I don't think Sierra Nevada needs really a lot of promotion from me, even though that's literally what they gave me the beer to do, was promote it. But, they're doing fine, is what I'm saying. I think Sierra's okay.
Yeah.
But because you said peach beer, I thought I should mention
that there's nectarine.
It's the Wonderland Nectarine Ale. Yeah, it's pretty tasty. It's not, I'm like a whiskey drinker, so if I drink beer, it's like one beer, especially if it's sweet. But yeah, it's pretty good. I don't know. This is probably the last few years, probably the least amount of beer I've ever drank. really just been sticking to like, I don't know, like a glass of wine or whiskey or something.
Yeah.
Not together. Couple nights together in the pandemic. Not a good idea. Don't mix wine and whiskey, everybody.
Yeah.
Beer and whiskey, delicious.
I'm a bourbon person myself, not because I actually prefer beer, but I try to do the whole low carb thing as often as possible. And it's a cruel twist of fate that I have access to beer all the time that my crew inspires and makes, and I can only have a couple a week. It's horrid.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, same. When Sierra hit me up, I was like, I guess I want a bunch of free beer in my house, but then I'm going to drink it, and then I'm going to feel bloated all the time.
Yes.
But
Our brewer Seamus, whose name you like, he has the gold standard of Sierra Nevada being one of his top 3 breweries that he looks at and is like, oh, these guys, for a widespread brewery, they kill it with all their recipes. Consistency is there.
Yeah.
So.
I have always liked it. I like their basic, just the green bottle ale. I love the celebration ale.
Mm-hmm.
Like, fucking rainy December night when you're like, I mean, it makes you comatose. Like 2 celebrations and it feels like you did take some Xanax.
They should
like
call it second blanket. Like
yeah.
You fall asleep with it.
It's so good. But they mainly gave me a bunch of their kombucha. And I love that. It's really tasty. It's a little bit of an acquired taste, but it's like, it's so good. Really light, crispy, like, love it.
Yeah, I'm on board. Also, I should point out, I'm double fisting this episode. It's not a good idea. I don't recommend it just in general. I especially don't recommend this combination. I'm drinking this chocolate cherry porter and also an IPA called Inner Peace Ale. That's how you get your IPA, Inner Peace Ale.
That's one of yours also?
Yes.
That's one of ours.
It's delicious.
Yes.
Solid IPA.
I like the cans. So many
Thank
women.
you.
I love it,
Yeah.
Christopher.
Yeah, that's our, we've got a can designer who is named Davina. She is a rock star. She was an intern at the church for a long time. And then when we were talking about getting serious about quality can design, she's like, hey, I'd love to put, my art in the hat. And we had known Davina for years, and Davina had never mentioned that she did art. And then Inner Peace was one of the first ones she came up with. And I was so stoked because diversity is paramount. And I had to give her no direction. She kind of takes the progressive values that we have as a community and puts them on a can. So she's knocking it out of the park. Talented kid.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Bunch of cans with women on them.
Yep, that's what
you're
we're going
making up for. Man, you were terrible
centuries.
as a teenager, Christopher. Just pure evil. I know it.
I actually really was, and there's not a day that goes by that I regret it. I'll live with it for the rest of my life, but my hope is to make a bunch of other people miserable about their past too. And maybe we can influence some positive redirection if we just call out stupidity enough.
Yeah.
So.
It's never too late to change. Like, you don't have to be stuck in a belief structure that's hurting you.
Right.
So make the change. Like,
Yep.
like Michael Jackson said.
Obviously, many, many issues with the Catholic Church, of course, goes without saying. But one of the things I do always think evangelicals could take a page out of the Catholic's book because young male Catholics, I mean, they're ashamed from birth.
Yeah.
And that's nice. They're easier to date. They kind of know what it's like to be a woman because they're just sorry for everything all the time. It's nice. I think some more evangelical men should try it. Just guilt.
We're all of, a similar generation.
Yep.
You guys, at least this was true for me being from the Bible Belt. It was interesting to see the Catholic Church go from being the uptight, very strict religious view of Christianity to now it's shifted and the evangelicals, like it used to be like, oh guys, we're changing. We got drums in church. We're doing things more. You don't have to dress up to come to church. And now, you still don't have to dress up to go to the evangelical church. They're still saying all that bigoted shit. And the new Pope is making some positive changes in the church. It's not enough, but it would be nice if the evangelicals could just start to, not be assholes.
Well, that's the weird thing about having this sort of like one random supreme leader. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, so many Catholics hate him, and it's mostly older Catholics that they're, they feel like he's signaling, moving away from Catholic ideals. But yeah, I mean, he seems like a cool pope to me, but the evangelical church doesn't have that one person where it's like, we've decided these are our values now because this guy, wants to feed the homeless or whatever, which is good. I think that there shouldn't be one dude who decides, but yeah, so many Catholics hate him. And I just think that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Now I should butt in here because Amy, I know you said you have to go. So I wanted to do two things before we get out of here. The first one is a Who's Your God special. I asked if it's still okay. You have a segment you do at the end of your episodes where you talk to comedians about their religious upbringing and their current beliefs, just to clarify what Who's Your God is, with Steve Hernandez. Great show. Listen to it.
You.
But you close out with a question. And I feel like since you're already hosting this podcast, you should just pitch this one.
Somebody had to host it, Ben. I mean.
Yeah, it's not me. Anyone will tell you that.
Oh, you want me to ask you guys? You want me to ask Christopher?
Yeah, both of us. That would be okay.
Okay. Ben, if you were going to create your own church or religion, the Church of Ben Rice, what are 3 things that you would teach or practice or rituals that you would have in that church? Number 1.
Number 1. This one is an oldie a goodie. Everybody uses this one. Don't be an asshole.
Yes,
Easy.
that is a big one.
My number 2 is Christians believe that God is in all things. That's the basic idea. So I suggest that you find your spirit and pursue your passion. So if you're finding God in music, if you're finding God in comedy, if you're finding God in building things, that's your God. It's a version of God. Just find what your spirit is and pursue that passion to the fullest extent that you can without going overboard.
I love it.
Yeah.
Number 3,
we've talked about this a lot already on the podcast, is basically be your own commune. If you have a skill set that you can share, you should do it. You should be giving to people when you have the ability to, when they do not have the thing that they need. So basically just make sure that everybody's okay. Be your own commune.
I love it. Okay, Chris, this is a tough question for you because you have a church.
Which is why
so we kind of know, we know the answers already. But, okay, and we've talked about kind of post-pandemic, how it might look. So, let's phrase it this way then. He just went away. What are 3 things that you would teach, practice, or rituals that you would have in your church that you don't currently, that you would like to work towards?
That we don't have currently.
Or
honestly,
dreams that you have. By the way, these can be silly or ridiculous. You can say a water slide park or whatever. Anything. If somebody said, here's $1 billion, what are 3 things that you want your church to do? What would they be?
For me, it would just to be known for certain values. And there's a scripture that comes to mind that says, seek justice, love mercy, walk humbly. Social justice is something that's very important to our identity, and being able to pursue that more effectively if we were given, $1 billion, that would be a dream come true for us. To fight for the oppressed is number 1. Number 2.
Can you be more specific? Are we talking about mutual aid, legal help, like educational programs? Like if someone gave you a blank check, what's the first thing that you would start at your church? And this is putting pandemic aside, like assume people can be in the same room together.
Yeah. If they could be in the same room together, I would say equitable housing would be very important for me. Efforts of housing, I think, are very important, but also to bring an aspect of racial justice to that. I mean, there's so many oppressed Latinx folks in our South County that are working for $1 a day, and they're all sheltered together in these tiny trailers. It's sickening what this country is allowing.
So maybe in the pie in the sky, you have all this money. Would you build housing and then reserve a certain percentage of it for either diversifying the housing population or having low income housing or whatever it is. Canadian style, basically.
For me, we had $1 billion. It would all be, reserved for people that are struggling with housing.
You just give people apartments.
Just give people a place to live. I mean, how you solve homelessness, California, is you give people homes. I don't know why California hasn't figured this out yet. So it's something that I would be really, really passionate about if I had, this blank check, like you're saying.
Yeah.
And then for us, the love, mercy, we don't tolerate intolerance at all. It's the one thing we don't tolerate in our community, because if bigots are comfortable, then all people aren't safe. So just creating a space that welcomes all faith perspectives and that centers on ethics. Like, who gives a shit if we believe in the same God or not? But we can all agree on love and mercy and peace and equity and things like that, or at least we should agree on those things. So just creating a space for the community that invites everyone to use and utilize and be together.
Number 3.
Yeah.
All the money in the world to achieve your vision. What are you getting?
If it had to do with that particular aspect, our denomination puts a cap on how much ministers make in this region. We can't make more than high school principals, which I think is a valuable tool.
That's great.
And I think that's very important. However, I would love to see our entire staff on church make that kind of income. So what we've done recently, we've all taken a pay cut, so we're going to be making the same. And to see us grow into livable wage for everyone, but also part-time hours for all of our staff that are 30 hours a week, 25 hours a week. There's this whole capitalistic mindset of burning yourself out.
Yeah.
By the time you're 50, bullshit. So livable wage with part-time hours for everyone, including in the brewery.
I love it.
More free time. I love it. All right, Amy, you have to go. That means this episode has to end.
I do, yes.
Before we go, where can people find you? Where can people learn more about Amy Miller, the comedian?
Oh.
Or the person?
AmyMillerComedy.com, my podcast, Who's Your God, which we've covered extensively. A lot about me on there. And then Twitter's just Amy Miller, and Instagram's Amy Miller Comedy, and Epix, and YouTube, and whatever. If you want to watch my stand-up, Comedy Central. I have an album everywhere. It's called Solid Gold. It's a few years old, but I think it's still funny. I don't know. I haven't checked it out recently.
And quick, you made a sly reference to your appearance on Vice's Flophouse. Done. Okay, because of the housing thing. I'm here to promote Amy Miller and Christopher VanHall from Greater Purpose Brewing. Where can people find out more about you, your church, your brewery, all that stuff?
So you can look at my book. It's called Reborn Again, Crucifying Christendom and Resurrecting a Radical. And you can also listen to our weekly podcast, and it's called Rev'd Up Theolitics. It's available anywhere podcasts are available. So check us out there.
This has been episode 139 of Barley Me. I've been your host, Ben Rice. Find me across social media at Barley Me Pod. Check out my chugs for charity. Definitely donate to my charity of the week. Thank you so much. And I want to say thank you so much to Amy Miller for appearing here on this episode. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
And Christopher VanHall from Greater Purpose Brewing. Thank you so much.
Anytime.
Thank you, guys. Good to see you. Nice to meet you, Chris.
Nice to meet you, too. And hopefully we'll talk again. I would love to do some collaboration.
Yeah, we'll have you on the podcast for sure. That'd be awesome.
Awesome.
And to my listeners, thank you so much for listening. Stay home safe.